Sometimes grad school can really suck. So deciding whether or not you want to go shouldn't be taken lightly. Today I'm going to talk about 10 different things I wish I knew before I went to grad school, so that I can hopefully help you make the same decision and see if it's right for you. Alright, so the first thing that I wish I had known before going to grad school was that you don't have to go right after undergrad. This is something that I did not really allow myself to explore. I found that I put a lot of pressure on myself to go immediately after undergrad because I had this fear that if I didn't go right after my bachelor's degree, that I would end up not going at all. So I told myself, even though you're not sure what you want to study, even though you're not sure about grad school in general, you need to go now because you probably will never go if you don't go now. And I realize now that that was a little bit close-minded. I also was putting too much pressure on my timeline and feeling like I was gonna run out of time to go to grad school, when in reality, I already graduated undergrad at 21, so I was a little ahead anyway. For whatever reason, I was still telling myself that if I didn't go now, I would never go. And that's just not true. I know people and professors even that I had who didn't pursue higher education until they were well into their 40s and 50s and even beyond. So that is not true, and I encourage you to not put that pressure on yourself. The second thing I want to talk about that I wish I had known before I went to grad school is that you shouldn't go unless you're confident that you want to use that degree for a career. And what I mean by this is there's lots of masters out there. You can do graduate studies in pretty much any discipline that you would want to, and that's great, you know, if you find interest in it and everything. But if you're wanting to make a career out of it, I would recommend making sure that that graduate degree is actually something that you need for the career that you want to do. So obviously, if you want to be a doctor or you want to be a therapist, something like that, you're going to need that higher education. I would just make sure that you want to pursue that field that the master's work would be in before you jump into it, because often if you're not sure, or if you end up just doing the master's out of interest, it's not going to be worthwhile, not going to be worth your time, not going to be worth the money that it costs to do a graduate degree if you're not going to go and then use that for your career. So the next thing I want to talk about is that more degrees does not necessarily mean more pay. And this is a big one that I think that society kind of preaches, that if you go not only to graduate school, but if you go to college at all, it's going to mean that you get paid more. There's really so many options for higher education and degrees that you can get that so many of them don't necessarily pay you more just because you have a professional degree in that field. For instance, you know, education, there's many opportunities where if you do get a master's in administration or a master's in education or something like that, then they do automatically give you a raise, because that's kind of like a tiered raise that they have set up and outlined in their system. However, there's a lot of different lines of work where that doesn't necessarily happen. And if there's people who have a bachelor's degree or even a high school diploma and they're willing to do that same job, and they'll do it for, you know, 5, 10, 15 grand less per year, then they're going to go with that option rather than someone who's almost overqualified for the job that they're applying for. I had a professor in grad school who actually shared a story about how he started to apply for jobs after he finished PhD work and was not able to get so many of them because everybody thought he was overqualified and thought, oh, we don't have the money to pay him, or we don't have, you know, a position that's worth his while, when in reality he just needed a job. So it can be detrimental even at times if you're not careful. So just be confident of what you want to do and make sure that it's the right choice for you, because again, more degrees does not always equal more pay. This next one transitions well out of the last one, in that more degrees does not necessarily mean more opportunities. And this is really just a case-by-case situation dependent upon what discipline you're in. Some degrees, like being a therapist, it requires a master's in order to get certified with the board in order to legally perform counseling and therapy services. However, if you want to be a music teacher, you don't need a master's in music. So it really just depends on what your goals are. But you might think getting a master's is going to open up more opportunities, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes a master's can even be too much degree for the job that you want to get, and also sometimes it can be not enough. If you're pursuing research, or if you're pursuing if you're pursuing academics and you want to teach on a collegiate level or something, then oftentimes the master even isn't going to be enough, and it's just going to be a stepping stone toward the PhD level work you're going to do, or the doctoral degree that you need to acquire before you're able to do the research you want to do. So just take inventory, see what that looks like for your particular field, and don't assume that a master is going to automatically open more opportunities for you. All right, number 5 is you might not need a master's even if you think you do. There's a lot of specialized fields that require involved degrees over many years, and there's many steps in that process to attaining a license or to getting a certain level of credential in order to perform that career or that job. However, there's a lot that don't require that, and as I was mentioning before, sometimes it can appear that you need that master's degree to set you apart from other people who might be applying to the same jobs, but also sometimes it really doesn't matter to the employer. So what I would encourage you to do is to consider whether the actual job you want to get is going to value that master's more or work experience, because so much of the job market is about work experience too. It's not just about the degrees you have. Often, the experience you have in a field will speak more highly about your aptitude for this job than your classroom knowledge of a given topic. Sometimes whatever you study doesn't necessarily apply to what you want to work in, and then that doesn't really get you very far if you have a master's in a completely unrelated field. I would just recommend that you consider whether it might be better to go to grad school and to get additional education in that field, or whether it might be better to just start building more work experience rather than taking the time and the money it takes to go to grad school. You are already a couple years into your work experience and working your way up to the position that you want. So this one ties really closely to the first one I mentioned, and that is you can always go back to grad school. This is something that I was not open to in my early years of adulthood. I think part of it was a result of the culture that I was around during my undergraduate studies. I was in a very academic and research heavy field, and so because of that, my professors all really encouraged pursuing master's level work and even PhD work in the future. I was convinced that that was what I needed to do, and then I needed to immediately go into a master's degree, and I had this fear, like I mentioned, that if I didn't do it now, I would never do it. And that's just not true. If it's important enough to you, you're going to come back and you're going to do it. But I think it's more valuable to take the time, even if you need a year or 2 or 10, to figure out what you really want to do, rather than rushing into a degree. Because of that pressure of doing master's work right after undergrad, I ended up kind of limiting my options, only applied to a couple of schools, and one of my biggest regrets about that season is that I didn't give myself more space and more time to consider my options and to make sure that I was actually pursuing something that I wanted to pursue long term and not just pursuing it for the sake of getting a master's degree. All right, number 7 is that employers don't really care if you have a master's degree. And this does have some nuance with it, but I'm 3 years removed from my graduate studies, and it's really never come up that I even have a master's degree in my professional career. And I am one of those examples where I studied a given career path and I'm kind of working in a different career path. I had studied for academics and kind of was going toward the path of becoming a professor eventually, and now instead I'm working in nonprofit work. So it's not exactly in line with what I'm doing, and because of that, my career and my workplace doesn't really value the master's degree that I do have. And unfortunately, it kind of makes it feel like it's undervalued, it's not worthwhile, and that nobody really sees the value of the time and effort that I put into that degree, even though I have something to show for it and I studied hard and did well with that degree. So, it's kind of disheartening when you've gone to school for that master's, and then it can feel discouraging that nobody really sees the value of that degree and the hard work you put into it. So just be mindful of that, because not everyone saw you in the trenches when you were working through that degree, and they don't see the value, and it doesn't necessarily mean to them what it means to you, because they don't share the same investment that you had into that degree. They mainly care about how is this person's strengths going to affect their job here, and if that degree doesn't directly relate to it, then it just doesn't mean a lot to them beyond this person was disciplined enough to get a grad degree. All right, so number 8 is going to provide a little more context for the last one, hopefully bring some encouragement that if you do already have a master's degree, sometimes the value of a master's degree isn't in the money you make. And this is something that I'm still learning about my own life and my journey through higher education and my career following that. But I look back on my master's degree and I realized that a lot of what I gained from that season was not necessarily what I learned in the classroom, but it was the relationships that I made, the professors that I met and gleaned from. I think that it's also shown me what I'm made of, that the master's degree program was very difficult, and I also was in a really challenging personal time through that season of pursuing the degree. And so because of that, it showed me how I can overcome things. It showed me the way I respond to adversity and how I am able to push through and persevere despite that. So I've learned a lot about myself through the season of grad school. It may not show up on your paycheck, but you do have value beyond just your credentials and maybe what you get paid. And sometimes that value is even greater in the long run, especially if you end up in a different field from what you studied in grad school. It changed my perspectives on so many things. It allowed me to see life from a lot of different perspectives other than my own. And it introduces you to people from all different types of walks of life. I think in undergrad, a lot of the people around you are pretty similar to yourself. But when you get into the grad school environment, there's a lot more non-traditional students. It's very intergenerational. And also my school that I was at, we had a very diverse student body from all kinds of countries across the world. And that was just an amazing opportunity to interact with people who are very different, and they're able to bring their culture to the table, and we're able to glean from each other. So that was something that I look back on my master's program, and I think that's probably the biggest thing I take away from it, is the diversity and exposure that I had to people who are unlike myself, which I think is vital, especially during your early years of adulthood. In addition to not only my perspective shifting, I think the 9th thing that I wish I had known is that I didn't know how much I would change and grow through my time in grad school. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's all due to going to grad school itself. I think that the years that I spent in grad school I would have been like 22 to 24, somewhere in there, when I was in grad school. And those were just formative years, as you probably have experienced, or you soon will if you haven't gotten to that age yet. Those early 20s years are extremely important for kind of finding yourself in a way, and you're just changing a lot. You're growing into your own beliefs and your own rhythms of how you do life and the person that you want to be. And on top of the adversity that I was facing during this time and the challenging family struggles that I was going through, those just kind of fueled this change in me as well. And helped me to seek better understanding of other people, and I think I grew a lot in empathy during this season, not only for myself, but for others, and I learned how to take care of myself mentally and have grace for myself, because I had struggled a lot with anxiety and putting a lot of pressure and perfectionist tendencies on myself, and this season was one where I learned to kind of let go of a lot of that and learned what life could look like if I did let go of that. So this was a great opportunity for me to grow individually as well. And I do think that part of that was just the timing, but part of it is also being in such a vigorous learning environment. That's a big part of the learning process as well, is growing in your own way and learning more about yourself through the difficulty of going to grad school. Number 10, and probably the most important one, is that there's no one-size-fits-all answer for grad school. And I believe that grad school is great for some people and it's vital for certain careers, but it's also probably horrible for other people and not the right decision at all. For instance, some days I'm great and feel so glad that I was able to go to grad school, and I'm super grateful for that opportunity, and I'm really grateful for the experiences that it led me to. And other days I feel really discouraged about the fact that I went through grad school and I spent years studying and I'm still paying for that degree, and yet I'm not really using it in day-to-day work. So that can be discouraging and disheartening after all the work that you put into this new degree. But again, you find ways to get value out of that degree in other ways that aren't just about the money you have or the career path that you're on. And like I said, it's good for some and bad for others. My brother and my wife both have pursued counseling as their careers, and for that career, a master's degree is required. It's part of that path toward licensure, and it's been a great thing for both of them. They've had their own challenges with the process as well, but in order to be a counselor, they had to go through that master's level work. So it really just, again, depends on what you're wanting to do. So one of the most important things I think comes with grad school is the question, why are you going? So I would challenge you to ask yourself, are you going because it's required for your dream job? Are you going for the prestige of having a second degree? Are you going because you've always dreamed of studying physics at the graduate level? Are you going because you feel pressure from your family because maybe they all have master's degrees and higher and you feel like you need to get one too? These questions and so many more help you decipher whether grad school is right for you. I believe in higher education and I have a master's degree myself. I made that decision and felt that it was worth it for me in the moment, and I pursued the degree and I got that degree, and it's something that I do cherish in many ways, but I recognize that that's not the right answer for everyone. So I would love to hear some of your stories and your thoughts. Please let me know down in the comments below if you've already attended grad school, if you're considering it, maybe what you studied, and also if you decided not to go to grad school and maybe why you made that decision. And we'll have a conversation down there, and hopefully your stories and mine can help others who are maybe in that same journey along with us. If you enjoyed today's video and you'd like to see more content like it, please consider subscribing and leaving a like below. And also share this with someone who you think might benefit from it. If you think of someone who's kind of in this stage of considering whether they want to go to that next step of grad school or whether they want to go into the workforce, send this video to them. But if not, I'll see you next time.